Hello everyone. You probably watched by now the clash between superstar model Myleene Klass and the most charismatic parliamentary candidate that there ever would be, Ed Miliband. Now, I'm not going to dwell too much on the whole debate thing, that's been covered a gazillion times, apart from the fact that I 100% agree with Myleene Klass. I don't necessarily think that she has any sort of, philosophy or economic literacy behind her points, apart from the fact that she doesn't want to be taxed. But then, who does want to be taxed? Nobody wants to be taxed. I mean, taking money from you without you giving consent and without there being any just cause. So, I don't see any particular reason why. More importantly than the whole, whether the tax is a good thing, is what it's being used on. I think that that's really important. The whole mansion tax thing, is misleading in the sense that it's a mansion tax, as Myleene Klass pointed out very well. But the fact is that this tax is being spent on our health system. Now, for those of you who don't live in the UK, basically right now, the National Health Service, which is basically what funds the UK health industry, is under a real big crisis right now. I don't know 100% what's going on. I don't think basically anybody knows exactly what's going on with the health service, but everybody knows that something is going really wrong. It's not as it used to be. So the main thing that everybody knows right now is that it's becoming really, really expensive. Everyone thinks that, you just have to twist a few knobs, all you need to do is get a few administrators out. That's the basic sort of consensus idea that most people have. But the problem is that they don't realise that the NHS has been getting more expensive for years, and I doubt it's going to stop. I'll just bring up a few figures right here. Okay, 18% of our budget is spent on healthcare. That's just 2% less than our biggest spender, which is pensions and overall welfare schemes. The funny thing about this is that everybody seems to say that, all we need to do is stop getting involved in wars and blah-de-blah. Wars count for about a third of what our healthcare costs, okay? Half of what education is. So when everyone says that all we need to do is just get rid of all this military spending, and everything will go back to normal. Military, 6% of spending, education, 12% of spending, NHS, 18% of spending. What do you want to get rid of? £40 million. That's what the NHS used to cost in 1995, just about 18 years ago. Now it costs £130 million. £130 million in 2014. That's 18 years, and if you count with the added inflation on top of that, that's basically about doubling in 18 years. So many people seem to say that this is something that's happened recently, and while I can understand that, that's not entirely true. If we go back to 1965, the NHS cost a measly £1.5 billion. And of course, by 1995, it was 40 billion. So if you add inflation on top of that, that's just under tripling. So nearly tripling the entire cost of the NHS in just under 30 years. So that's not exactly like any business you'd ever heard of. Do your smartphones today cost £20,000 each? No, they don't. They cost less than brick phones did 30 years ago. So as we can see from this, the NHS has been getting expensive for years and years now. It hasn't just been some little kerfuffle that's happened in the past 10 years or so, it has basically been like that for the entirety that we've had it. So now you probably wonder, why is the NHS getting so expensive, and why are we having to increase taxes as a result? Well, the main reason from where I'm standing from is due to the fact that when you monopolise something, that's what the NHS is, okay, about 90 to 95% of all health spending in the UK, the other would probably be something like Bupa, is through the NHS, £130 billion a year. And there is no profit incentive in this healthcare industry because it is all done by the government. What normally happens in a privatised business is that somebody comes along with this new piece of technology, and at first it's really expensive and only the rich can afford it, but as time goes on, technology progresses and so on, the things from the past now become quite cheap. That's because people are buying things, people understand that that's interest, so they can make money in it, so they go and make more of them, and of course supply and demand, things get cheaper for all of us. So I got a new phone last week, and I noticed that the iPhone 4G, or 4S, or whatever it's called, is now worth £14.99 per month. And I thought, wow, that's really, really, really good, and I was considering getting one, but back in, 2011, they were something like £50 a month. So it's gone down really, really fast. So people like me can afford, with not very much financial backing, some good quality stuff at low prices. With something like the NHS, on the other hand, there is no competition involved. As I said, 90% or whatever is controlled by the state. So basically what you have is this system where nobody has any incentive to make anything that will become cheaper in the future. So things that improve longevity, things that combat diabetes, that combat health problems of any nature whatsoever are really expensive here in the UK because nobody has any incentive to make them cheaper. In normal free market competition, things do get cheaper over time, but when they're in a government-controlled monopoly, things are really, really expensive. I mean, not just expensive, but they take a long time. That also adds to the expensive cost, but they take a long time to come to fruition. I mean, how long does it take to get like a drug from the market? Something like 9, 10 years, something like that. I think that's what they said in the Dawkins documentary, something like that. And of course, that's because if the government gets one thing wrong, then boom, they are out of office. So they have to be super, super, super careful about getting drugs onto the market. So yeah, it's a really, really annoying problem with healthcare in this country, and it's not going to go down anytime soon. So Ed Miliband has come to the rescue and decided, well, we need to enforce this new tax called Mansion Tax. And this is expected to raise £1 billion. Wow, that's a lot of money. Yeah, £1 billion. Hang on a minute. So the NHS has doubled in the past 15 years, 18 years. So £1 billion is probably going to keep us going for another few months, maybe a year. How exactly is that going to work? What always happens with taxes, as brilliantly stated by the woman from Taxpayers Alliance last week on Question Time, is that we get a tax that goes to the rich. We all hear it's going to go to the rich, and then eventually over time a sense of urgency arises amongst the people, and they say, well, we need to institute this among people who are of lesser class as well. And it just goes on like this. We have to keep on adding more and more taxes to a healthcare system that is in no way going to slow down anytime soon. Each time some new product comes into the health market, it's not for free, we have to pay for it, and taxes are going to get more and more expensive as time goes on. People seem to think that health is this unalienable right. It's basically the same as food. I've said this in a previous video. You know, food is not controlled by the government, but everybody has food. You know, even if you can't afford food, if you have no money, there are soup kitchens, there are food banks, there are places where you can get food. You just get lesser quality food. So I can imagine if the NHS were privatised, I hope it is, I can imagine quite a lot of sort of, you know, health banks or health kitchens or whatever you want to call them, released across the country by charities, by people who want to make a small profit, by small businesses, whatever, to help people out. And I just don't understand this way that somehow, you know, health is this magical kind of deity that must be protected and must be provided to all. I don't like the idea of people, you know, dying from diarrhea or dying from vomiting or dying from diabetes or dying from cancer. I also don't like the idea of people starving to death. Not that many people are starving to death thanks to the great work of some really charitable, generous, compassionate people out there, and none of those people happen to be politicians. They happen to be normal, everyday people who want to just see the world be a little bit better by helping people out, by way of charity, by way of giving people jobs, by way of giving people money. Oh, and to add to this, just wanted to make this one thing pretty clear. Because of, you know, the expenses of the NHS, people are now saying that, well, we need to cut down on things like smoking, tobacco, we need to increase the taxes on really bad things like alcohol and fatty foods in order so the NHS can become can stay afloat. Can I just ask one thing? What is it that the NHS is supposed to do? The NHS is supposed to cure people, it's supposed to help people, that's what health does. So why on earth are we basically saying, let's get rid of all the things that can make us unhealthy? What's the point of having an NHS if you can't do anything? You know, you say, oh, in order to make sure that healthcare is alright for everybody, we can only make it so that it's by accident. If you did it deliberately to yourself for any reason whatsoever, then you have to pay for it or whatever. And you have to pay these extortionate amounts because healthcare is so sacred and so expensive. Yeah, what the fuck? What is the NHS? It's a mix of commodities and services, and that's the same for just about any business. I do not understand why the NHS cannot be privatised. People will still be able to get health any way that they can because people don't just sit around and wait for themselves to die. They find ways of doing things through voluntary cooperation. So the idea that Ed Miliband can just say that we need to increase taxes in order to save the NHS, sometimes I just wonder it's not worth saving. It's sometimes good to just let it die. Let it go into the hands of the people, not the bureaucrats, not the large amounts of administration staff that are now employed in the NHS and continue to be employed, rather than, doctors and nurses and God knows what, the people who would actually help people, and instead into ways that would generate money. The NHS creates no money, it only redistributes it around. So my basic idea is if we just let go of the NHS one bit at a time, stop pretending that it's this great deal, that it's this best, outstanding, envy of the world kind of thing, and start understanding that it's not. It's getting really shit. We're running out of money. We're getting a terrible service as a result. I had to wait a week for an appointment at one part, and by that time my illness had gone away, and so we had a missed appointment there. So that, did a lot of good for a lot of people who wanted actual help, but didn't it? The only problem that really arises from private competition is abundance. Now, I would muchly prefer abundance over any stupid little equality for all type of mumbo jumbo. It's not about equality. It's about making people better off. It's about providing more things for people. So that's my whole damn point about why mansion tax, why the NHS is not necessary.